It started like any other Saturday morning. I was sipping my coffee, standing by the window, when I saw something strange near my mailbox. At first, I thought maybe it was a maintenance guy from the HOA, but then I recognized her Karen. Not just any Karen, though. The HOA Karen. Clipboard in one hand, drill in the other. And before I could get outside, she was already going at it, drilling straight into my mailbox like she owned it. Now, here's the thing, this wasn't just any mailbox. It's federal property. Tampering with it is actually a federal offense. But Karen, she didn't care. She claimed she was enforcing neighborhood guidelines because, in her words, my mailbox looked too modern. Yeah, let that sink in. And what she didn't know, what made this whole situation even more unbelievable, was that I had recently installed a small, hidden camera inside the mailbox post. Not to spy on anyone, but because we'd had a few package thefts on the street. Lately, I never thought it would capture something like this. So, I watched the footage later, and what I saw. It wasn't just her messing with the mailbox. She was talking to someone on her Bluetooth earpiece, saying things that made my stomach turn. Let's just say this went way beyond HOA rules. This was personal. And now I had it all recorded, time-stamped, and clear as day. The funny part? When I confronted her, she acted like she didn't even touch it. Denied everything. Said I was making things up just to cause drama. But I had the clip. I had the proof. And when I showed it to the HOA board, well, let's just say, that's when everything really started unraveling. But that moment, that confrontation. You won't believe what happened next. A few days before the whole drilling incident, there had already been tension. Karen had sent out one of her infamous HOA notices, typed in bold red letters, claiming my mailbox didn't match the uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood. The funny thing, I had just replaced it a month ago after the old one rusted through. I even made sure it was within HOA guidelines, right size, right color, everything. But that didn't stop her. She seemed to have made it her mission to monitor every inch of my property, always peeking from behind her curtains or walking her dog past my driveway 3 times a day. Neighbors had warned me. Everyone had their own story. Some said she'll find a family for using the wrong shade of mulch. One guy told me she once took pictures of his backyard from her 2nd-story window because he left a plastic chair out too long. The pattern was clear. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was controlling everything, and anyone who pushed back suddenly became her next target. So when I saw her drill into my mailbox, I wasn't surprised, but I was frustrated. I'd kept my head down, played by the rules, but that didn't matter to her. The real twist, though, was discovering she wasn't alone in this. In the camera footage, there was someone else on the other end of her call. She said something like, "I'm handling it now. He won't be a problem much longer." It wasn't just about a mailbox. It sounded planned. Like she had a bigger reason for wanting me out of the way. And when I started asking around, quiet conversations turned into nervous glances. A few neighbors told me things that made everything feel even more off, like someone was pulling strings behind the scenes. That's when I realized this wasn't just about HOA rules. I started digging, not just metaphorically, but literally too. I checked the HOA documents, the original neighborhood charter, everything I could legally get my hands on. That's when I noticed something strange. A clause buried deep in the older rules that gave a specific committee one that no longer existed: oversight over exterior fixtures like mailboxes. It had been removed in a quiet update years ago, but Karen still referenced it like gospel. I asked the HOA president about it, and he got oddly defensive, said Karen had authority from the board but wouldn't say more. His reaction didn't sit right with me. Meanwhile, the hidden camera had picked up more than just the drilling. 2 nights after the incident, someone walked up to the mailbox again. They didn't touch it, they just stared at it for a long tour. Minute, then walked off down the street. Hood up, head down. Checked the timestamp. It was almost 2 a.m. That's not just a nosy neighbor. That's someone watching. And the next morning, I found a scratch down the side of my car. No note. No one saw anything. One of my neighbors, Lisa, quietly approached me while walking her dog. She whispered that I wasn't the only one Karen had targeted like this. 2 houses down, a retired couple had put up solar garden lights, and Karen claimed they were electrical hazards and forced them to remove everything. Another neighbor started a small vegetable patch and suddenly got fined weekly for unauthorized landscaping. Everyone seemed scared to talk openly, like they'd all learned the hard way that going against Karen led to consequences. The weirdest part, Karen didn't even live in the neighborhood full-time. She owned a rental here, but had somehow managed to get on the HOA board and take over. Every new complaint, every rule she pushed, felt less about community and more about control. And now, with my hidden camera footage and these late-night visits, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was trying to silence me before I found out why. The more I looked, the more things stopped making sense. I found out Karen had pushed. Through a vote, barely anyone remembered it giving her sole access to certain HOA funds for neighborhood improvements. But there were no visible upgrades, just vague invoices and check numbers going to a consulting firm I couldn't trace online. I started making copies of everything: meeting minutes, emails, screenshots of security footage. I didn't know what I was dealing with yet, but it felt bigger than just a petty mailbox issue. That week, I got a letter taped to my front door. No envelope, no name. Just one sentence: drop it, or it gets worse. My heart sank. I looked around, but the street was quiet, too quiet. Even the neighbor kids weren't outside like usual. Something had shifted. People were avoiding eye contact, closing blinds a little quicker. I was starting to feel like the outsider on my own block. Then came the HOA meeting. Karen stood at the front like she owned the place, reading off a list of supposed violations against my property. Mailbox modification, aggressive confrontation, and, get this, unauthorized surveillance. She actually tried to spin the hidden camera like I was the threat. I stood up to defend myself, started to explain everything, but the board shut me down. Said I had to submit my concerns in writing. That's when I realized the board wasn't just uninformed. They were either scared of Karen or part of whatever this was. After the meeting, Lisa caught up to me in the parking lot. She handed me a flash drive and said, "You need to see this." But not here. Her hands were shaking. She wouldn't even tell me what was on it, just told me to watch it somewhere private. I took it home, heart racing, not knowing what I was about to uncover, but knowing for sure it was the missing piece. The thing that might finally explain why Karen was going so far to keep people quiet. And why she'd drilled into that mailbox. In the first place, I locked the door behind me and plugged the flash drive into my laptop, half expecting it to be empty or corrupted. But the files were there, dozens of them. Video clips, email screenshots, even audio recordings. I clicked on the first video. It was grainy, shot from what looked like a phone camera through a window. There was Karen, standing in front of another neighbor's garage late at night, talking to someone I couldn't quite make out. Then came the words that made my stomach twist. It's the only way to push him out. Once that mailbox is flagged, it gives us legal ground. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were creating violations on purpose, using loopholes to harass certain homeowners. And it wasn't random. The emails showed patterns targeting people who questioned budget decisions, who skipped meetings, who dared to ask where HOA dues were going. One name kept popping up in the email threads: Mitchell Langston. He was the so-called consultant getting the mysterious HOA payments. But here's the twist: Mitchell wasn't a contractor. He was Karen's brother-in-law, using a shell company to funnel money straight from the neighborhood's budget. I sat there, heart pounding, flipping through the files. One folder was labeled Mailbox Footage. Inside was a video from my hidden camera, but it had never been posted or shared, so how did Lisa get it? That's when the final file opened on its own, like it had been programmed to autoplay. It was a screen recording of someone remotely accessing my security cam feed. They were watching my cameras in real time. I yanked the flash drive out, terrified. Not only was I being set up, they had access to my devices. This wasn't just about HOA abuse or a mailbox violation. Someone was actively monitoring me, and if Lisa hadn't stepped in when she did, I might never have known. The worst part? The footage showed someone I trusted was involved too. My hands were shaking as I stared at the frozen frame of the live feed. The person sitting at a desk, watching my camera footage, was Tom, my next-door neighbor, the guy who lent me his ladder last fall and offered to keep an eye on my house. When I was out of town, I wanted to believe there was some kind of mistake, but the footage didn't lie. He was logged into a monitoring app, one I never even installed. That meant someone had cloned my network or gained access some other way. And Tom, who always acted like the reasonable one at HOA meetings, was right in the middle of it. The next day, I took everything: videos, emails, screenshots, even the footage of Tom to a lawyer who specialized in HOA abuse cases. She reviewed it carefully and said I had more than enough to file a formal complaint with the state and possibly even press criminal charges. But she warned me to be cautious. When people feel power slipping, they panic, she said. And she was right, because that night, someone tried to break into my garage. I was awake when it happened, too paranoid to sleep. I heard the clinking of metal and caught the figure on one of my side cameras. I called the police immediately. When they arrived, the person had already fled, but they left behind a crowbar and a HOA violation slip, a blank one, still warm, from a printer. That was it. I turned everything in legal filings, a complaint to the state HOA commission, and even submitted the flash drive anonymously to the local news. The fallout came fast. Karen was removed from the board. Mitchell Langston was investigated for fraud, and Tom, he moved out in the middle of the night before the subpoenas could land. But just when I thought it was over, I got one last email from an address I didn't recognize. No text, no subject. Just one image attached, a photo of my front porch. Taken that morning, the fight may have ended, but someone out there still wasn't done. I stared at that photo of my porch, wondering who took it and why. At first, I felt the panic creep in again, but then something shifted. I realized whoever sent it wanted me scared. They wanted me to feel watched, just like before. But this time, I wasn't alone. The story had gotten out. Neighbors started speaking up. People who had stayed quiet for years came forward with their own experiences, sandfare fines, threats, even forced compliance. Turns out, Karen's reign had lasted so long because everyone thought they were the only one. But once the truth was public, it broke that fear. The new HOA board was made up of actual homeowners now, people who cared about the community instead of controlling it. They started an open forum system where anyone could speak without getting shut down. The mailbox, by the way, still stands, camera and all. I never took it out. It's not about paranoia anymore. It's a reminder. As for Lisa, she moved out a month later. She said she needed a fresh start, somewhere quiet. Before leaving, she dropped a note in my mailbox that read, "Sometimes doing the right thing just means showing someone else they're not crazy." That stuck with me and Tom. We never saw him again. Rumor was he skipped town and cut off contact with everyone. But no one really knew for sure. What started with a simple drilled mailbox turned out to be a much deeper story about control, intimidation, and standing up when it matters. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence only helps the ones in power. So if something feels off, trust your gut. Ask questions. And sometimes, you install a camera. You never know what it is. Might catch.